Hello, and welcome to the Peaceful Empowerment Work Show. We are live on WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network. I am here. I am your co-host, Judy Forder, and I am
You are here.
I am here with my co-host in peace, Miss
Kris Burke. Hi, everybody. I'm
Hi,
here too.
Before we get started, if you like the content that we're putting out, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. We are back with our special teacher series, How to Cut Chaos in the Classroom, today, part 3. And if you've been watching this series, I'm sure you can tell there's a definite energetic difference between day 1 with me doing this show to today. This has been a huge healing process for me, and I would just like to voice my appreciation to Kris and all of the viewers out there for taking this ride with me. And I think we're going to have an interesting day today.
I do too. And thank you, Judy, for being willing to be vulnerable and show people, what it means to start out in a zone 1. Okay, I'm feeling a little triggered. I'm remembering some memories about times that I was dismissed and disrespected and people were aggressive toward me. In my teaching role, right? In your teaching role, that stuff started coming up, and you could have just said, I'm not doing this, or you could have made up an excuse, or you could have even, gotten a cold. Our minds are pretty crafty characters, and they will pull a cold or worse out of their pocket if they need to. If we can't look at what we're feeling, if we can't address it. And so good for you for being willing to do that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So there are a couple things that were coming up for Kris and I to discuss today. And we're not real sure the order of it all because, we just don't know. So
we don't. We'll know as we go, right?
Yeah,
just like life, we'll know as we go.
We'll know as we go. One of the biggest things that kept coming up for me is to remember and remind people that chaos shows up differently in various situations. Something that I feel is chaotic, Kris may not feel is chaotic. I mean, we've been working on a project outside of Masterful U, and when I first was brought in, Kris is like, yeah, we're doing this. It's a little crazy, but we have these things in place, and we're going to get it all worked out. Meanwhile, I go from this Masterful U, Peaceful Empowerment Works, flowing and going with what I'm guided to, wham, this is fucking chaos. And everything in my system was like, ah! Meanwhile, Kris is like, hey, it's all good. We're moving and grooving. I was like, this is fucking insane.
Yeah, which actually brings up a really good point that we were talking with someone or one of our students this week was talking about how she was trying to create new relationships, which is the same thing we're talking about in the classroom. You're trying new patterns, right? We're going to explore and experiment and try new things that work better for us. And she was talking about how she felt like, she was as anxious about trying this new thing as she was when she just went and did the old thing that she knew wasn't healthy for her or healthy for the other people in her environment. So that brought up a really good point, which is when we start trying something new, it will absolutely be uncomfortable. And uncomfortable is not the same as toxic or dangerous.
No. And what else we've learned is that uncomfortable feeling is not just in your mind. I mean, your body, your physical body is used to a certain routine, used to certain patterns. And when we pull ourselves out of those familiar patterns, our body has a physical reaction. So we physically start to feel just as uncomfortable as we do mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
And it's when we can sit in the knowing of this is uncomfortable, because Kris and I, we talk all the time about being comfortable in the uncomfortable. And when you can be comfortable in the uncomfortable, what you all have seen unfold in the past 2 shows to where I am now is exactly what happens.
Yep.
You know, I know that I'm safe with Kris, so it's okay for me to sit in that uncomfortable space because she's not going to judge me. She's not going to feel any kind of animosity toward me. She's going to hold the space that I need for me to work through my shit. And on
Yeah.
top of it, she's going to hold me accountable. She's not going to let me bullshit myself. She's not going to let me tell myself lies. You know, she's not one that feeds or strokes the ego. She speaks in truth. And I count on that. I count on that very much because it's going to sound crazy, but it helps speed up this healing process.
It does. It does. And sometimes people get upset that I don't stroke the ego because they feel like I'm not doing the loving human thing, you know, but actually, if you know that somebody's dealing with a past trauma, and if they can just sit with it and breathe, that it's going to leave their lives and they're not going to have to deal with it again, do you really want to make them like feel like, right, exactly. Because in order for them to get comfortable again, they have to be like, oh, they have to stuff it back down. You have to stuff the feelings back down. And so every time we go to coddle somebody, there's a difference between coddling somebody. Like, I've noticed that when we're trying to working really hard to make somebody else feel better, it's because we don't feel okay in their discomfort.
Yeah. Yeah. We are uncomfortable. Somebody starts to cry and it's like, oh my God, what do I do?
Right.
So you do whatever you can to make them stop crying.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those things where, you know, when in my healing journey early on, I did a lot of big circle work. And the facilitator would always go through the circle rules. And one of the rules was you don't stroke, you don't hold, you don't hug, you don't even hand people a tissue. If they are having an emotional response, you sit and you allow them to have that emotional response. And if you're uncomfortable, go within and ask why.
Yep.
And when you do that, you get to a point where you can sit in the uncomfortable with people that are uncomfortable. And you learn that truth is the greatest expression of love.
Yes.
Truth without judgment is the greatest expression of love.
Yep. Yes. In fact, when you can sit and say, you know, congratulations. When somebody's crying, like really sobbing, congratulations, you're pulling something up that really has been holding you back. Keep crying, keep processing, you know, keep going. I'll sit here with you. And what's funny is as soon as you give people permission to cry it all out, what generally happens is instantly they're like, oh, because it relieves that that conflict they had with, I feel emotion that I need to express, and oh my God, I can't express my emotion, right? So as soon as you say you can express it, it's just like push. It's like a glass of water comes out and it's done. Whereas when we continue to try to fight against ourselves or hold something back, it doesn't ever get a chance to just move through. Right? A good snotty cry is a very healing thing.
Oh gosh. Oh my God. You know, people are like, all I do is cry. Well, you got a lot in there.
Yeah. Hey, I've done a lot of crying, and I'll take crying over, you know, there are a lot of different ways. I mean, vomiting, all kinds of fun things that we can do to get toxic emotions out of our bodies. And let me tell you, crying's one of the nice ones.
It's, yeah. Yeah. We were talking the other day. We work with another lady and she sneezed. And she was like, I don't know what's going on. And we were like, your face releasing. And that's a way.
Yeah, enjoy that because that's, yeah, sneezing is wonderful.
Okay. So, all that being said, we laid that foundation because we are going to present some ideas, some things to think about.
In the classroom. We really are going in the classroom.
We are going in the classroom. some things to maybe try that are going to feel uncomfortable at first. Just remember that uncomfortable is not toxic,
Right.
because the reality, if you're here watching this show, the possibility of you being the toxic element in the building is pretty slim. And Kris is funny. She's like, I could feel that, you're the defender of teachers. You want to believe that all of them have big, beautiful hearts and blah, blah, blah. And yes, 99% of the teachers out there are working heart-centered.
No,
No?
I disagree.
Okay.
Yeah. And not because, and I do believe that we all have the potential to be heart-centered beings.
Mm-hmm.
And my experience working with schools and having been a child myself is that actually there's probably a 20% of the teachers and administrators in a building are kind of in that bully, want to be in control mode. And 80% of the teachers are trying to not get steamrolled.
Okay, so in your experience, that's what it's been.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, in my experience from the teacher standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
I'll go with the 99%. They have a good heart, but they've been beaten down. They're tired, and they don't know where to turn. They don't know what to do. They think everything they try to do to shift things is just pointless and a waste of energy.
Yeah.
And that 1% that, for whatever reason, we know that hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, they create a toxic environment. And what do we say? It only takes one bad apple.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
So we're talking from different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I was somebody who was in a lot of different buildings. When I went part-time, I worked in 3 different elementary schools.
Mm-hmm.
Now granted, my middle school was one school. My high school career was one school. But when I started popping around and working part-time, I was in 3 different elementary schools. So I have the whole spectrum
Mm-hmm.
of those experiences. Not that you as a student attended these things, and then you've worked with teachers as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was, you'd have a handful of teachers in the building, and it would only take one administrator. If the principal in that building was toxic, the entire building was toxic.
Yes.
And that was my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I also was gifted, this opportunity with 2 separate administrators. The principals that I had, these 2 were not, and they created very safe environments for teachers to explore. At least this is my experience of it, for
Mm-hmm.
teachers to explore and try new things and connect with the children.
Yeah, and it's a good point. We always talk about the zones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm saying I think 20% of the teachers in a building are toxic, what I'm saying is I think 20% of them are essentially operating in zone 1 and 2.
Okay.
Without the self-awareness to realize that's happening. I don't mean I think they're bad people. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying I don't think they want good things for the kids. I just don't think they're connecting with their inspiration and their intuition, because I think they're trying to survive. And some of them are trying to survive by, being invisible. And some of them are trying to survive by being in control.
Yes.
And I don't think that just happens in our schools. This isn't like a pick on teachers day. I think that's, kind of happening in a lot of places, because if it were, one apple, it's pretty easy to pick the apple and toss it out the window and say you're fired. But when you have a contingent of people that are
depends
working,
on the position of that apple.
True. Yeah. 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 True. Yeah. But normally there's people in a workplace, there are dynamics that happen. the power structure. There are dynamics happening around the power structure, and there are people that participate with that. And
Mhm.
I know, having spent time with teachers in meetings where they were specifically trying to figure out how to not be toxic anymore. We had people there who were teaching, spiritual things and whatnot, very spiritual things, and everybody in the room was afraid to cross them.
Mhm.
Right. So what I'm saying is they don't look necessarily. I'm not saying there are people that everybody would say, "Oh, that's toxic," but when the other people, when the other teachers in a building don't trust somebody or afraid to cross them, that's not healthy. That is toxic,
Yeah, that is
right?
toxic. And one of the
Yeah.
messages that I keep hearing over and over again, and I'm pretty sure I brought it up in the other shows, is it's time to be intentional.
Yes.
It's time to be intentional. Yes, this is the way it's been. This is the way, old patterns, blah, 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 blah. Okay, if you want real change, it's time to be intentional.
Yeah.
And that means you don't, you're not silent anymore.
Right.
You're not silent anymore. We're not saying, we don't support, picketing and raging. We're going to fight against. No, it's not about fighting. This is about, wherever there's conflict, there is no peace. So when we talk about, creating connections in the classroom, we're not telling you, you got to go verbally fight the administration or whatever. This is about you and your classroom environment. These are changes that you make, little shifts that you make in an effort to make that connection, because we were talking about energetic exchanges.
Yeah.
Everything is energy, and our school system is built and developed where the teacher is the authority, the kids sit and listen and learn, and that's what it is. Well, these
Hmm.
kids are demanding through behaviors that they want change.
Hmm.
Their needs, they need to be invested in their learning. And I know there's a lot of teachers out there trying different things and doing different things and being very successful with making these connections with their students.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear from you. We would love to hear from you. And Kris and I just want to bring about some tools that
Hmm.
teachers can use, because connection is key.
Yeah. It's all about connection. And, it's about heart to heart connection. It's about it being safe to give and receive of ourselves, of our truth. Right? So when I talk about toxicity, I'm including people who are afraid to tell the truth. Right? And if I'm really honest, which is the truth is kind of about being really honest, it's probably more like 99% of us that are afraid to tell our truth in
Mm.
our work, in any workplace. Right? We're afraid to tell the absolute truth. And that creates the conditions for toxicity, because when we're not able to be real, there's some part of us that's telling us it's not safe to be me. And if it's not safe to be me, that's going to put me in zone one. If I hate being in zone one and I power out of there, I'm going to get myself into zone two, and I'm going to try to control the situation and the other people so that I don't end up back in zone one. And all of that behavior is very human and very natural and nothing to be ashamed of, and not healthy for any of us.
No, no. And here we go. When the emotion and the mind believes that it's not safe, the body responds.
Hmm.
The body responds. You are physically sent into fight, flight, or fawn,
Right. Or freeze.
or
Freeze is
free.
another favorite one. Yeah.
You have a physical reaction to the fact that you don't feel safe. And a lot of people don't even realize it, because it's the way they felt their entire lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
It's interesting because I saw a lot of kids who were in the school with kind of their hoods up over their heads, looking down, not making eye contact. And you kind of wonder, I wondered, like, wow, what's going on in there and how did that happen? Um, and then you realize it's freeze, it's classic freeze, fight, flight, freeze, right? And the child who is in freeze mode, it does not mean that the child is, that's not who they are or what they're like. It just means that when they get into zone 1, they express it as freeze because they've learned that that's what is safest for them.
Mhm.
Right? So they just shut down and try to be invisible because that's what they feel and probably have been proven to them is the safest path for them. So when we see these kids in the classroom, it's important to understand that they're not able to think when they're in that mode because literally their fight or flight brain, that primitive brain, is taking over and ruling the day, and they're not able to access their thinking brain. They're on total autopilot. So when we're either yelling at a child or talking to a child or whatever it is that we're doing to try to get them to break out of what that zone 1 behavior is, it's important to understand they're in zone 1 and they can't process at a higher level what you're saying. The only way to help them to get out of there is to help them to feel safe. And when they feel safe, they'll come out of there on their own because it's natural.
Mhm. Yeah, and they want to point out when you worked with those high school students with your horse program,
Hmm.
the biggest thing you did on the first and second day was you allowed them to be and express whatever it is they needed.
Yep.
You had girls that needed to lay down and sleep and nap, and
Yep.
that was okay.
Yep.
You know, it was okay and safe for them to be them and do what they knew was best for them. You
Yeah.
trusted them.
Yes. We know what we need if we're given permission to explore it. And if we're not sure what we need, we can always invite, I like to say to people, if you need to move your body, let's get up and move your body. If you need stillness, let's be still. And I'll ask someone, what do you need? They'll say, I don't know. Try it. Move a little bit. How does that feel? Does that feel like the right thing? No. Then sit still. Try that. Does that feel like the right thing? Maybe you need to roll around on the ground a little bit.
Mhm.
Right? Explore, experiment, get to know you and what you need, and realize that if you need movement right now, 10 minutes from now, you might need something different. And you're the only one that's going to have access to that information.
Mhm. Yeah, I know before I left the elementary school, they started infusing brain breaks into the day where the kids would get up and they'd put a song on and people could dance or whatever. But it was interesting because some of the teachers like, get up, it's time for brain break.
Yeah.
You gotta move your body.
Right. Right. Exactly. And I've had teachers tell me, like, don't let the kids see you smile before Thanksgiving, right? Because they'll run
Mhm.
all over you. So instead of trying to connect and build this kindness and trust and respect thing with boundaries.
Of course.
There are boundaries. Kindness and respect has to be a two-way street. And when it's not, then we're dealing in something different.
Hmm.
But give the invitation and be really clear about what those boundaries are. Right. And we were talking a little bit about offering, inviting people. So Judy was saying, well, Kris, what about when somebody, freaks out? When one kid in the class, you're probably not allowed to say freaks out. When one kid in the class gets big, let's call it that, then you're supposed to the other protocol is to march the other kids out. And so we were talking about, well, how do you start paying attention to what's about to happen, to what's happening in the energy, how things are changing before it happens so that you can redirect it, right?
Hmm.
Um, and for example, I work with horses. So some of the horses are more extroverted. So when you ask them to do something they don't want to do, they'll pin their ears back and make a face, "Nah," you know. And some of the horses are more introverted, and so they'll just like tighten their jaw. Right? But everybody's got a breaking point. So if you keep asking someone to do something they don't like to do and you don't help them to process those, I don't feel good about this, and you don't help them to actually feel good about it, and you keep poking, 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 eventually you're going to get a big reaction, right? Well, the extroverted horse, I'm going to know that's coming. The introverted horse, I have to pick up. I have to be more tuned in. I have to feel when they get to a place where their tail is switching and there's a tension. I have to feel the tension. And then I've got to change up the game, because if they end up going into an explosion, I take responsibility for the fact that I wasn't doing my job in helping them to manage their emotional state. Because I don't care if you're a horse trainer or a teacher. I don't know. I don't want to upset anybody. But to me, the most important thing that we can do is to help people to first manage their emotions, because we cannot learn until we're in emotional neutrality at the very least.
Mhm.
Maybe we can't have positive emotions, but we at least have to be a place where we're not in those negative emotions, because we literally can't access our thinking, reasoning brain until we're on that solid emotional ground.
Yeah. And this isn't something that you can do if you're in zone one.
No.
If you
No.
no,
No.
if you're in zone one or you're in zone two, these aren't things. And as a teacher myself, you could read the kids. You could and I mean I could read them. I could feel their energy. I could see if a kid needed a little more attention today. Or there were some kids, especially when I was coaching, there were some kids that responded to, hey, knock that off, do it this way. And another kid would be like, hey, why don't we try doing it this way?
Mhm.
It's differentiating is the big educational word they want to throw around. But differentiating is knowing your kids,
Mhm.
knowing how to reach them. And sometimes we have to intuit that. That's where zone three comes from. Trial and error, figuring out how to connect with these kids.
Yes. And for the love of God, not getting upset with ourselves when our first and second and third and fourth attempts don't work, right?
Yeah, swimmingly. Well, that was a big failure. No.
Yes. No, that was a valiant effort.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a student, a boy at the high school that I tried and tried and tried to connect with this kid. And he just, I was the woman. How the hell did he end up with a female PE teacher? Was pretty much the attitude I kept getting from him. And we were probably two months into school. And over the weekend, I had gone to a NASCAR race with my brother. So I come in with the raccoon eyes and the sunburned face and all that kind of stuff. And he actually walks over to me and he goes, "What happened to your face?" And I said, "Oh, I was at the NASCAR race in Daytona this weekend." And he goes, "You were? Who's your driver?" I said, "Dale Earnhardt." He's like, "Yeah, I like him." And from that point on, we were good. We
Yeah.
were solid. I mean, he was always willing to help. And it was just that I couldn't figure out how to get to him, how to connect with him. And there it was.
That's such a good point, because sometimes we're trying too hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we can be open to noticing, if we can make the invitation, I'd like to help you to make your learning experience better. Because the truth of the matter is, we need the kids to participate in the process of creating a positive environment and valuing learning. And if they don't do that yet, that's a great place to start.
Mm-hmm.
If they learn, doors open to them, because here we are, later later in life, not quite in the sunset years, but we're approaching them, right? And we're still learning. I mean, we're taking classes, we're watching things, we study all the time, because learning needs to be a lifelong thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not actually true that everything we need to know in life we knew in kindergarten. I don't. There's a play, books, it's a
Yeah,
lovely,
there's something along those lines. Yeah.
right? Lovely story, but actually not true, because we learn through experience. And the truth of the matter is, we find out through experience that a lot of the things that we believed early in life weren't quite true.
Mm-mm.
And they were hurting us. Believing those things was limiting us, it was causing us pain.
Yeah. Sit with that one for a little bit.
Yeah, I heard yesterday that situations don't cause pain, expectations do. And see, this is a lifelong learning. And I went,
Hmm.
that feels true.
Because we know
Right?
expectations are the cock block of the universe.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit about when we talk about redirecting, right? Because here, if I were a teacher and I were hearing us, and it was like, oh yeah, just intuit when it's going to happen, and then redirect it, I'd be like, easy for you to say, and I'd probably be in zone one, which means I'd be. What does that mean when we're in zone one? It means that we feel tight. For me, it used to be that my chest would get really tight and my throat. My stomach would be sort of turning. My head I'd get a little dizzy, like I couldn't think. My palms might get sweaty. A whole bunch of things would happen, and my feeling would just be like, I need this feeling to stop, right? And it would be the kind of thing that if somebody poked on me when I was in that mode, I would rawr, right? I would just say something completely inappropriate to try to get them to back away from me because I felt so bad in my skin and I couldn't think, right? So that's what zone one is. And so if you're in zone one right now, let's just invite you to just say, oh, I'm in zone one and I feel really terrible. And just invite you to just rest your eyes on something and just take a breath, like a nice, slow in, out, 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 all the way down to your toes. And if you're first starting to do it and you feel like I can't take a deep breath because you've been rabbit breathing, welcome to the human condition. When we're in zone one, that's really normal. It's okay. Maybe try a little. See if you can sound as silly as I do when I do that, right? Give yourself a little belly laugh, a fake one. It'll reset. It will cause you to actually take that nice deep breath that you're looking for all the way down into your stomach, and it will slow your breathing down. And as your breathing slows down, the rest of your body will return to a thinking state, right? To a state where thinking is possible. You understand when your body like takes off, your brain's like, yeah, we're not going to send blood to the thinking part of the brain because we need it in the fight or flight muscle groups. So we're going to rely on instinct, which has gotten pretty good at surviving. And we're going to leave the philosophizing about what happened until later when the danger is gone, right? We don't think during the danger, we react and then we get away from it. But when we're in the classroom, or we're here listening to a podcast and we get triggered, there isn't actually an imminent physical danger that we need to flee. And we really do want to invite the thinking brain back in, which means first, so important, first, we have to create the physiological conditions where our brain can come back online.
And breathing does that. Deep breathing allows more oxygen to flow to the brain.
Yeah.
Okay. And that pause, stopping yourself, pausing, taking those breaths breaks the emotional loop that you get in when we're in zone one.
Yeah.
And that's tells the brain, oh, that we're going to try something new.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to try something new. And that's important.
It is important. So let's talk about what to do. What are some of the things that we can do? We've got a classroom, we want to change the energy. We want to change the environment in the classroom so that kids can breathe deeply. Mm-hmm. That's the goal. And the teacher and the kids are in the same energy. And so if you're wondering how the kids feel, check in with yourself. How's your breathing right now?
Yeah. If you need to reset, they need to reset.
Absolutely, 100% of the time.
Yeah.
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 And because this is, yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, just as we said, the principle of the building sets the tone. You set the tone in your classroom.
Absolutely.
So if you're uncomfortable, you're in zone one, that invites the kids to be in zone one too. So if you can take that pause, breathe, and get yourself up out of zone one, that invites them to do the same.
Yeah. And if we're in zone two feeling bossy, we've all got a zone two. We get in zone two and it's like, no, let me tell you, I've had enough of this. We're going to do it my way and we're going to do it now. Mm-hmm. That feels aggressive to other people. It just does, because all of a sudden you're saying, you know, I'm going to make you bow to my wishes, which, because our instincts are in control in zone one and zone two, even though the intellect is online, instincts are still kind of running the show under the surface. When we feel attacked or manipulated, we again go into zone one. So we become fight, flight, freeze, or as Judy mentioned, fawn. And what does fawn mean? It's like we start stroking the ego of the teacher or whoever the authority member is so that they'll favor us
Mhm.
and not be mean.
Yeah. So you won't be the target.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But if people feel threatened, they will react by falling into zone two, zone one rather, um, without knowing they're doing it. It's not intentional. The child that seems difficult is a child who has emotions that are in zone one a lot of the time, and they don't know what to do about it because the people around them haven't mastered how to breathe through uncomfortable emotions and then process in hindsight, what do we do to move forward without dragging those emotions along.
Yeah. And remember, we said when you're in that space of trying something new, it is going to be uncomfortable because it's new and it's unknown. It's not
Mhm.
because you're not capable.
Mm-mm.
It's not because it doesn't work. It's because it's unknown.
Yeah,
And remember, your body physically responds to the unknown to make you uncomfortable.
right.
The
So
body, that voice in your head starts telling you this ain't going to work. This is a waste of time. Why are you even trying this? If you can move beyond that discomfort, there's change.
yeah.
There's really good change right on the other side.
Yeah, and our experience has been that, heaven and earth will move. If you really say, I want to open up and give myself and these students an opportunity to have a different experience, one that's really healthy and one that will create more happiness and a better learning environment and help them to prepare, really prepare for life ahead. If you set that intention, heaven and earth will move to support you, right?
Yeah.
It's like
And
I
I,
got goosebumps saying that. Yeah,
I could hear teachers saying, I don't have time for all this. I don't have time
right,
for all this. And
right.
I want to tell you, it will be time consuming in the beginning because you're all trying something new. But once you move through that and it feels better and things work better and the flow is going, it's going to save you an immense amount of time.
Yeah, and, how much time when we're teaching, and, I always gotta zoom out because that's just kind of where I see things from, but is it a good use of our time? Are we being productive when some percentage of the kids in our class are unable to hear us and take anything in?
No, I know. And that's kind of the point I was making, obviously not clear enough. you know, is once you establish that you have a safe environment for kids to show up and be kids, they're engaged.
Yeah,
It's an energetic exchange. They are a
yeah,
part of the process.
yes. And let's
And when
talk
they,
about that in a really I'm sorry.
I
I
was going
think
to
we're
say,
both getting so much good stuff at the same
yes,
time.
go ahead.
Yeah. Uh Yeah. So, what does that look like in a really tangible way? So, one of the ways that I might do it, which does not mean this needs to be the way that you would do it, but one of the ways that I would do it is invite the kids and say, you know what? Not super thrilled about the way things have felt lately. I feel like we're not having enough fun. And it's so important that we have fun in learning, because when we're having a good time, when we're engaged in our learning, when we're interesting, it's really soaking in and we're learning the things that are going to prepare us to have the life we want to have. I don't even know what kind of life you want to have, right? We might start that process of inviting kids to start imagining. And this is so key. I would invite them to imagine. I would give them an opportunity to write about it, to draw about it, to do whatever, express it in whatever way they want to take clay to maybe to make a mess. Because maybe right now that's what their future looks like to them. I would let them start where they are. I would not require them to share. I might invite them to share. And if anybody said, I don't want to share, I'd say, okay, thank you for being honest with me. right? So instead of not only not making them wrong, I would make them right because they are, because the truth of the matter is a child's truth and your truth as a teacher is a precious thing. And if you're willing to share it, my feeling is always, I want to honor that. I want to thank you for being brave and telling the truth, even though you knew there was kind of this undercurrent expectation about you were going to do the thing that you think you're supposed to do. When you're brave enough to say, I need to do the thing that feels right for me right now, I'm going to applaud that. Right? And then I would invite people, okay, here's some things we can do. Some of us might need to move right now, might need to move our bodies. Some of us might need stillness. Some of us might need some noise, and some of us might need quiet. Now, you can't do the quiet and then making noise at the same time, but you can do movement over here and stillness over there. And you might invite people to switch. And if somebody sits there looking down like this, not interested, well, they've chosen stillness, and don't make a thing about it. Mm-hmm. Just don't let them be. When they start to see, because they won't trust it. Mm-hmm. Initially, like, oh, you're trying to get me to do something. You're trying to manipulate me. And I don't know what your game is, but I don't want to play along, right? I know I'm going to be in opposition to whatever game the teacher's going to play because I've learned by now not to trust. It doesn't mean teachers. It means I've learned not to trust, that I can't trust people to be who they say they are, to want what they say they want. I believe they'll tell me they care about me, and then they'll treat me unkindly, mm-hmm. which makes it hard for me to trust myself, right? So the most important thing that we can do in that classroom is to connect with those children and let them know, I'm here to support you in learning how to be you. And I will do what it takes to create conditions where that can happen. And there are boundaries. Remember, there are boundaries, which means there are things we are not allowed to do. Yeah. That has to be clear. And it has to be clear that if we can't stay within those boundaries, then we're going to have to change the possibilities.
Yes. Okay. As you can see, we've run over a little bit.
But well worth it.
Yes, well worth it. Kris and I were joking earlier because I was like, what are we going to do when I stop running out of hidden traumas for us to talk about on the show? So we're going to put this out there. If you have specific situations that you would like to see us work through on the show, or you offer up any topic, that you would like us to work with on the show, we have an email address for you. We would like you to email your comments, thoughts, suggestions to Kris@peacefulempowermentworks.org.
Yep. And there it is on the
KRIS. Yeah, KRIS at peacefulempowermentworks.org.
Yeah. And Judy sees the emails too. Just so you know. So it's the one inbox that we use. It's just I set up the techie stuff, so I named it that.
Yes. So thank you all for joining us today. We're on one hell of a ride, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. And hey, if you're still here, congratulations. Well done.
Yes, well done. Well done to you, Kris.
Thank you. Well done to you, Judy.
Thank you.
Sometimes I feel like we're those little chipmunks, Chippendale.
Okay.
No, you go first. No, you.
On that note, we shall bid you adieu. We will see you next week.
Thank you. Adieu.